Now it's time for the last word. Jonathan Capehart is in for Lawrence. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Jen, I'm gonna no chit chat between you and I because I want you to go off and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Jonathan. Have a great show.
ASAP. Thanks a lot, Jen. So 48 days, thousands dead, gas prices surging, shipping disrupted around the world. And this is what Donald Trump had to say about it all yesterday.
I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon.
Tonight, all we're left with are Donald Trump's claims that the war in Iran is not only going swimmingly, but should be ending pretty soon. This morning, Donald Trump said, quote, "Iran has just announced the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you." 21 minutes later, Donald Trump posted the correct name of the waterway, saying, quote, "The Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business and full passage." So tonight, for all the violence and volatility Donald Trump's war of choice continues to cause, the Strait of Hormuz is back open. Back in effect to where it was before Trump started his war. Donald Trump also said that the U.S. naval blockade will, quote, "remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete." In a phone interview with Bloomberg News, President Donald Trump said Iran has agreed to suspend its nuclear program indefinitely. Of course, Bloomberg reminds us, details of any potential deal remained murky, and Iran has yet to comment on Trump's claim, which is virtually certain to go against its long-standing insistence that it has the right to enrich uranium. Yesterday, Donald Trump said this.
By the way, we had to do a little journey down to Iran, and I didn't want to do that, but we had to because we can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
Today, Axios is reporting, quote, "The U.S. and Iran are negotiating over a 3-page plan to end the war, with one element under discussion being that the U.S. would release $20 billion in frozen Iranian funds in return for Iran giving up its stockpile of enriched uranium, according to 2 U.S. officials and 2 additional sources briefed on the talks. When asked to confirm the story, the White House said, quote, "Productive conversations with Iran continue, but we will not negotiate via the press." For those of you keeping score at home, $20 billion is 20 times more than what some Republicans criticized President Obama for.
Obama gave them $1.7 billion in cash, green cash. Took it out of banks from Virginia, D.C., and Maryland, all the cash they had. He flew it by airplanes in an attempt to buy their respect and loyalty, but it didn't work.
Weeks after Donald Trump's war began, voters are blaming Trump for the high gas prices. The latest Quinnipiac University poll finds that 65% of registered voters blame Donald Trump either a lot or some for the recent rise in gas prices, while 34% blame Trump either not much or not at all. 57% of registered voters disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling the economy, while only 38% approve. But Donald Trump is dismissing those concerns.
How much longer will Americans continue to see these high gas prices?
Well, they're not very high. If you look at what they were supposed to be in order to get rid of a nuclear weapon, with the danger that entails. So the gas prices have come down very much over the last 3-4 days.
Well, according to the AAA, gas prices are still, on average, more than $1 a gallon higher since the start of Trump's war. The Quinnipiac University poll also shows that 58% of registered voters disapprove of the way Donald Trump's handling Iran, while only 36% approve. And remember, Donald Trump's a whole civilization will die tonight threat if Iran didn't open up the Strait of Hormuz? 64% of voters think the threat was not acceptable. But for all the criticisms voters have for Donald Trump's war strategy, Donald Trump continues to criticize the way the media is covering his war of choice. After saying today was, quote, a great and brilliant day for the world, Donald Trump seemed optimistic. But that tone shifted when Trump suggested that the only appropriate reaction to what he claims to have done today is to say, quote, job well done, Mr. President. Leading off our discussion tonight, Congressman Adam Smith of Washington State. He is the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Smith, thank you for coming to The Last Word. As the top Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, have you been briefed by the White House on any of Donald Trump's claims today?
Well, actually, I was briefed yesterday by Admiral Cooper, the CENTCOM commander who's in charge of the war. And there's no truth whatsoever to any of these claims. Iran has not agreed to any of the things that Trump said today that they had agreed to. Now, it's not the first time Trump has made these claims. And I do also want to correct you just one point. The Strait of Hormuz is not actually open like it was before the war started. There were some ships that went towards the Strait of Hormuz and then turned around. Because Iran, though they said the Strait of Hormuz is open, they then said, but you have to go through this path close by Iran and you have to clear it with the IRGC. So even that, even the thing that we had before the war started, Strait of Hormuz isn't open. And we've done nothing about the nuclear weapons, nothing about the support for terrorism, nothing about their ballistic missile program. So the troubling is Donald Trump is just apparently making this up, claiming that the Iranians have agreed to things that clearly they have not agreed to.
Congressman Smith, you've just made, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've made some news here. The Strait of Hormuz is not open.
Well, it's not actually news. I've seen a fair amount of reporting here. I mean, Iran has said that it's open, but then they've also said that you have to go by this one particular passage and you have to still clear it with the IRGC. But let's say for the sake of argument that Iran did in fact say it's open, go. That doesn't solve the problem because the shipping companies and crucially the insurance companies have to trust that it will be open. That's the problem with starting this war. I mean, look at the Houthis over in the Red Sea. This was a year ago when we had like a 3-month fight with the Houthis to get them to stop shooting at ships going through the Red Sea. And then the Houthis did agree. They said, we're not going to do it. And they haven't. They haven't shot at any ships. The traffic through the Red Sea is still a trickle of what it was before that began because of all the conflict in the region. The shipping companies don't trust it. So we're not anywhere close to back to where this strait was before the war started. Tip of the iceberg of the problem with the larger war and how we end this and how we get out of it and sort of get the Middle East back to where it needs to be. But it is a point worth noting. We've not seen the Strait of Hormuz go back to anywhere near what it was before the war started.
A moment ago, you said it seems like the president is just making things up. And I'm just wondering, Congressman, one, is there any evidence to Donald Trump's claim that Iran has, quote, agreed to everything? And two, I'm just wondering, how can you verify what is actually happening, no matter what the president says?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's simple. Like on the Strait of Hormuz, are ships going through the Strait of Hormuz or aren't they? They aren't. Okay, it's right there. We can see it. Has Iran turned over their nuclear material or haven't they? They have not. Have they actually stopped supporting Hezbollah and Hamas? They have not. So you can see what's right there in front of you. And also, do remember that the way these negotiations are going, there are no direct conversations between Iranian leadership and the United States government. The only time that happened is when J.D. Vance went over to Pakistan. They sat down and talked to each other. This has been going through recently Pakistan. At other times, it's gone through Oman and Qatar and Turkey and other places. So Donald Trump doesn't have direct conversations with any Iranians. And yet he keeps going out to the American people and saying, the Iranians told me they've agreed to this, that. Those conversations are maybe they're happening in Donald Trump's mind, but they're not happening. Now, you can argue this is a negotiating tactic. He's just trying to, bluff his way through it. And I don't see the logic of that. I don't see how Iran suddenly says, well, if Trump said it, it must be true. No, they come out and say, no, it's not true. So yeah, it's really troubling. The evidence is clear. Trump is not having any direct conversations with Iran. We're going through those negotiations. If those negotiations actually start up again, allegedly, J.D. Vance, I guess, must be having another trip back to Pakistan soon. We'll see where it will go. But we're no closer now than we were before Donald Trump made up all the stuff he made up earlier today.
So, Congressman Smith, given what you just said, now I'm just wondering, because there's always a lot of happy talk that comes from the president, and then the markets respond. You know, the oil markets respond, the Dow responds. Yesterday, the Dow was up near 1,000 points. Happy talk today, the Dow is up almost 900 points. Do you think he's doing all of this simply to impact the markets and specifically the Dow?
I think that's a huge part of it, and no question. I mean, the degree to which the markets continue to be suckers for that is astounding to me. I mean, keep in mind, the president was going to end the war between Ukraine and Russia on day one of his presidency. Mexico was going to pay for the wall. Donald Trump has this big, beautiful health care plan that he was going to pass and solve all of our problems that we still haven't seen 9 years after he first said it. So look, I tip of the hat to the president. I mean, his ability to BS the world and get them to buy into it is otherworldly. I mean, it's beyond anything that I've ever seen before. But reality does ultimately intrude. And when it comes to the Middle East and the cost of this war and the impact it's having on the economy and our alliances, the lives that have been lost, the devastation to the economic picture, certainly in the Middle East, that's a reality that, I mean, Donald Trump can go in front of a camera and say, it's all good, everybody's fine. You know, it doesn't change the reality of what's actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Adam Smith, I wish we had more time, but we are out of time. Thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
Thanks for the chance.
Coming up, Donald Trump already appears to be making excuses before this fall's midterm elections for why Republicans might end up losing control of the House and even the Senate. But, spoiler alert, he's not blaming himself or his massively unpopular policies. More on that next. Unpopular war president Donald Trump was at a Turning Point USA event in Phoenix tonight, trying to pump up the conservative youth vote in Arizona ahead of the midterms, although Donald Trump has no idea why.
And I was going to say that when a president wins, Republican or Democrat, for some reason they lose the midterms often, most of the time. It doesn't make sense. For some reason, a president, Republican, Democrat, the party does poorly in the midterms. It doesn't make sense. I'm still trying to figure it out.
The Atlantic seems to have figured it out. Tracy Calvo, a 61-year-old Democrat living on a fixed income, said she's poorer today than she was in 2024 when she voted for Trump, believing he would bring down prices. High gas prices mean that she is staying home more often, skipping Bible studies at her church, volunteering less, and even missing exercise classes. Trump's decision to go to war with Iran was her breaking point with the president. Quote, "I think that he just wants war," she said. "He's made it plain that he's adversarial with everybody." She doesn't plan on voting for any Republican, for that matter, in November. The Atlantic reports Trump's approval is lower right now than it was at this point ahead of the 2018 midterm elections, when Democrats won back the House in an historic blue wave. Almost every new poll is a red flag for Republicans. Independents, young voters, and Latinos, groups that were crucial to Trump's win in 2024, aren't in the bag anymore. At this point, it seems safe to declare that the historic coalition that powered the president's second re-election is finished, kaput. According to Yale University's spring 2026 poll, most voters, 57%, disapprove of President Donald Trump's job performance, compared to 41% who approve. Young voters overwhelmingly disapprove of the president's performance, with large majorities of voters aged 18 to 22, that's 68%, 23 to 29, 72%, and 30 to 34, 75%, expressing disapproval. It seems that has some Arizona Republicans wishing Donald Trump would stay away. Back to that report from The Atlantic. The storm cloud of negativity hanging over the president explains why his planned appearance in Arizona Friday will be so short. From touchdown to wheels up, Trump is scheduled to spend just 2 hours in Phoenix, we learned, a remarkably quick visit compared with his previous hours-long rallies featuring never-ending parades of MAGA loyalists. Some Republican operatives who expect to soon face highly competitive races want the president in and out of Arizona as quickly as possible. Quote, when Trump comes out for a rally, he dominates the news the day before, the day of, and the day after, one GOP consultant told us. It's a reminder for voters of why they're angry. Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton of Arizona. Congressman, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word. Before you were in Congress, you were mayor of Phoenix. So how have the Trump promises of lower prices turned out?
The Trump's promise of lower prices have been a complete and total disaster. And it's the exact reason why at that Turning Point event in Phoenix today, about 1/3 of the seats were empty. And they were trying to target a young audience, but very few young people were in the audience because young people are repelled by this president, repelled by his policies. They're really smart. They know that they've done nothing to lower health care costs. In fact, just the opposite. By not supporting the extension of the Affordable Care Tax credits, they've made health care way, way more expensive, double and tripling premiums. The tariffs. The American people know the tariffs are a tax on them, raising prices of everyday goods, making groceries more expensive. And now the war in Iran, the war of choice, has significantly raised energy prices, gas prices. And so the American people know, young people know who to blame for it. And that is Trump and his policies and the Republicans in Congress who won't do anything to stand up to this president.
So I was going to ask you, what are you hearing from Arizona voters? But it sounds like you're getting an earful on healthcare, on prices, on the price of everything, and on the Iran war. Which one has people most vexed in Arizona?
Well, right now, of course, it's the Iran war. People who were sold a bill of goods by this president, claiming to be the president of peace, now finds us in a significant chance of a forever war. And they know the insanity of his policy. Iran did exactly what experts said they would do, close down the Strait of Hormuz, massively raising gas prices. So what does this president do? He releases sanctions on Iran and Russian oil, thereby helping Putin in the war with Ukraine, and of course, helping Iran and their funding of actors in the arena in the Middle East that are doing terrible things in that region. People know that his policies are backwards and raising prices on the American people, and that's why his numbers are doing so poorly. He deserves the negative approval ratings that he has because of his horrific policies, and Republicans in Congress are also going to pay the price because the American people that know that they are doing nothing to rein in this president. They're not doing their jobs as members of Congress to provide oversight over this administration. And we're heading towards an authoritarian type government, and that's not what the American people want.
Well, to that point, Congressman Stanton, the Cook Political Report has two Arizona House races as toss-ups. Arizona 1 in suburban Phoenix, Republican Congressman David Schweikert is running for governor, leaving that seat open. The other is Arizona 6 in southern Arizona, where Republican Congressman Juan Ciscomani is running for a re-election. Can Democrats flip both of those seats?
We will. We're going to flip both of those seats. I mean, the Joanna Mendoza, who's running against Juan Ciscomani in southern Arizona, Juan Ciscomani announced raising $1.1 million last quarter. She raised $2.3 million. She more than doubled up the incumbent. That sends a strong message about where the energy is in Arizona 06. In AZ01 in Maricopa County, that's one of the most competitive seats in the country. We have a competitive primary on the Democratic side, really strong candidates. We're going to have a great candidate coming out of that race, and we're going to win that open seat against the Trump supported Jay Feely, the former kicker of the Arizona Cardinals. I think he'll realize he spoke at today's event at Turning Point. I think he'll realize towards the end of this race, when it gets close to the end, he's going to rue the day that he accepted that Trump appointment. That's going to be the kiss of death, not really supportive like it may have been in the past. And don't forget, we have a great candidate in Northern Arizona, Jonathan Nez, the former president of the Navajo Nation, who has a really good chance of a significant upset in Northern Arizona against Eli Crane. We're going to punch above our weight in Arizona, and Trump can come every day he wants. The more Trump appears in Arizona, the better we're going to do in the midterms.
Some big optimism there in Arizona. Arizona Congressman Greg Stanton, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word. Before his trip to Arizona, Donald Trump paid a visit to neighboring Nevada. And while trying to sell his big, ugly bill to voters in Las Vegas, Donald Trump proved once again just how completely out of touch he is with everyday Americans. Listen to this.
Earlier this week at the White House, I met a wonderful woman named Sharon Simmons, a grandmother driving DoorDash to help support her husband's cancer treatment. She's got serious cancer. He's going to be okay, I think. Sharon delivered McDonald's to the Oval Office. It was a little bit of a, to be honest, it was a little tacky. The great big beautiful bill also slashed taxes on millions of American small businesses, including restaurants, dry cleaners, corner stores. What is a corner store? I've never heard that term. I know what a corner store is, but I've never heard it described, a corner store. Who the hell wrote that?
Keep in mind, this man lived in New York City for a vast majority of his life and claims he's never heard of a corner store? Girl. But the out-of-touch president is hoping Republicans can buy a midterm lifeline. Axios reports President Trump's super PAC plans to begin unloading its massive war chest around Memorial Day, giving a major boost to Republicans heading into a treacherous midterm election, Axios has learned. Despite the terrible polls, a series of recent GOP election losses, and projections that the party could lose the House majority in November, top Republicans see hope in their financial might. Democrats are scrambling to raise money, but have nothing comparable to Trump's cash flush operation. The Democratic National Committee has been outraised by the Republican National Committee by 7-1. And if they can't spend their way to a midterm victory, Republicans have a backup plan. Try to change the rules in their favor. Reuters reports the Save America Act looks set to die in Congress, but 23 mostly Republican-led U.S. states have recently changed their voting procedures to mirror key aspects of President Donald Trump's sweeping package of voting restrictions in time for November's midterm elections, a Reuters analysis shows. Officials in at least 17 of the states have opted to follow one of the Save America Act's most controversial mandates, screening lists of registered voters for non-U.S. citizens by running them through a federal system normally used to verify eligibility for public benefits. Joining us now is Nevada Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar. He is the chair of Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. Secretary, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word. What's the latest on the voting restrictions Trump wants to enact?
Well, first of all, secretaries are on the front line of protecting voters all across this country from these illegal acts, from these brain-dead policies that are coming to us from a federal government being expected to be implemented on the local level. What concerns me is the fact that it's creating chaos within the election system. As elections officials, as people on the front line protecting our democracy and protecting access to the ballot box, which determines a lot of the issues we're talking about today. Talking about cost, we're talking about public education, we're talking about small businesses struggling to cover the costs that they are seeing. You know, I was recently at Costco, I looked at the cost of gas, I looked around me, there were Uber drivers, there were landscapers, all dependent on the price of gas. And when you start to take away the opportunity for people to put food on their table, they start to recognize the importance of the ballot box and why they need to elect officials like Secretary of State who are going to fight for them every single day. But what you mentioned and what's really concerning is the amount of resources that are going to be spent in a few next months. I'm fighting to raise the resources to protect what we have here in Nevada. Nevada runs some of the most safe, secure, and accessible elections in the country. But there are secretaries in Arizona, secretaries in Michigan who are standing the line and protecting what we have to ensure every American voice is heard, even though the Trump administration wants to silence many of those voices. But we can't do this alone, and we need help and we need support. So I encourage people to go to CiscoNV.com or Dems Estate and start to invest in secretaries so that we can continue to fight this fight and push back against these ill-conceived policy ideas.
Secretary Aguilar, there's been a lot of fear about ICE and armed federal agents being deployed to polling stations. What's your response to voters who are worried about that?
I share their concerns, but again, the secretaries are coming with plans to address that. Unfortunately, I think the damage has been done by even addressing the conversation of it. The fact that they even mentioned it and the fact that they aren't saying it's not going to happen is creating the fear among voters. I was just at a local community member in our historical west side of Las Vegas, predominantly Black. And that was the first question that came up from the community, saying, what are we doing to ensure that people feel safe at polling locations? That conversation shows you the impact of the threat of federal agents being there. But secretaries have to be at the front of it. They have to be prepared. We have to have a solution. And my response was, first, we're going to push back. We have legal pleadings ready to go. The first instance a federal agent shows up and intimidates a voter, it's a felony in Nevada to intimidate a voter. It's a felony to intimidate an election worker and a poll worker. We are going to be prepared to go to the courts to get a fast response in order to get the cover that local jurisdictions from law enforcement are going to need to ensure that voters feel safe. But again, the conversation, even the discussion of it or the threat of it is already creating fear within our Latino community. And we have to figure out what a strategy is to ensure that people feel safe and secure when they cast their vote.
Nevada Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Coming up, Donald Trump is clearly obsessed with building his gaudy, oversized ballroom at the White House. But for the second time, a judge has halted construction, this time telling the president's legal team, quote, national security is not a blank check to proceed with otherwise unlawful activity. We'll discuss this latest Trump legal humiliation next with Barbara McQuaid. Tonight, Donald Trump is learning once again that there are limits. Limits imposed by the courts and limits that he clearly doesn't like. Because for the second time, a federal judge has halted construction on Trump's latest obsession, a massive $400 million ballroom he once built on the White House grounds. The Trump administration argued in court that the construction should continue for national security reasons. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon rejected that argument, writing, defendants argue that the entire ballroom construction project from tip to tail falls within the safety and security exception and therefore may proceed unabated. That is neither a reasonable nor a correct reading of my order. I will further clarify and amend my order to stop only above-ground construction of the planned ballroom. My amended order does not, however, stop below-ground construction of national security facilities. In other words, Judge Leon is saying, if you want to build bunkers, fine, but there is no national security need for a grand ballroom above ground. Donald Trump's response was predictable. He lashed out, calling the judge a Trump-hating judge who is going, quote, out of his way to undermine national security and to make sure that this great gift to America gets delayed or doesn't get built. But here's the line from the ruling that matters. National security is not a blank check to proceed with otherwise unlawful activity. And that applies far beyond Trump's dream ballroom. Today, we also learned that the Justice Department has removed the lead prosecutor overseeing an investigation involving former CIA Director John Brennan, a longtime critic of President Donald Trump, according to two people familiar with the matter. An investigation widely seen as driven not by evidence, but by vengeance. And it doesn't stop there. Donald Trump is still going after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, continuing to push for a criminal investigation, despite federal courts already shutting that effort down. Joining us now, Barbara McQuade, former U.S. attorney and a law professor at the University of Michigan Law School. She is an MS Now legal analyst. Barb, the Trump administration has already filed an appeal on the ballroom. How likely is that appeal to succeed?
I don't think it's very likely, Jonathan. I mean, what we've seen here is President Trump go it alone, raise private funds to alter the White House. And the plaintiff in this case is the National Trust for Historic Preservation. This is an organization chartered by Congress that is supposed to oversee and approve any changes to historic buildings. There's also the problem with using private funds for a public works project. You know, if you could, you know, law professors love to take a hypothetical to its extreme. What if the president, say, completely tore down the White House and said, I'm going to put up some mod building there in its place? I think then we would see how ridiculous it is that he even tore down the East Wing to replace it with this grand ballroom. If that's to be decided, it's Congress who gets to decide that, as guided by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The reason the judge is so angry about what happened here is he already ordered a halt of the construction, but he allowed a limited exception as needed for national security reasons, because the Trump administration has represented that they're building a new, larger command center and underground bunker under the new ballroom. They just kept building and saying, well, we need this ballroom, we're going to bulletproof glass and all these other kinds of things. And he said, no, let me be very clear. You can continue with the underground bunker, but you got to stop on the ballroom.
Oh, gosh. Barbara, Trump very effectively used lawsuits to run out the clock before the 2024 election. Is it possible that can be used here to run out the clock on building these paeans, these monuments to himself?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to happen. It's to me shocking that the East Wing was torn down. That is really a travesty. We've seen the Rose Garden paved over with pavement so that larger crowds can gather to listen to the words of wisdom of Donald Trump. But I think the amount of time it's going to take and the role of the National Trust for Historic Preservation is unlikely to let this go. So I think it's going to be tied up in the courts for at least a couple of years. And perhaps we get to the point where we have a new administration that comes up with a different plan for what should go in place of the old East Wing.
Let me get you on one more thing, and that's about the Justice Department. Maria Long, a veteran prosecutor for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida, told colleagues in her office that she had recently told her superiors that there was not ample justification to bring charges against Brennan, according to one person briefed on her discussions. The Justice Department called it routine practice to rearrange attorneys. What does this signal to you?
Yeah, this signals to me that there is a career prosecutor who looked into this case and is not either giving the Justice Department the answer it wants or is not moving quickly enough to deliver an indictment, and that she is no longer working on the case. I think it's concerning that they don't take her advice and instead want to persist in the case. But it does suggest to me that this lawyer has made perhaps an assessment that this case is not meritorious and that either it's not ready or it's just not there, and that the Justice Department doesn't care and doesn't want to hear what the legal analysis is. It just wants to file charges to mess with John Brennan.
Mm-hmm. Barbara McQuade, as always, thank you for coming to The Last Word.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Coming up, a Republican lawmaker said he thinks Trump might be the second coming, while another politician made international news for calling Trump a, quote, corrupt gangster. That's next. In a week with a whole lot of crazy from Trump world, let's not sleep on this from Pete Hegseth.
You see, the Pharisees, the so-called and self-appointed elites of their time, they were there to witness, to write everything down, to report. But their hearts were hardened. Even though they witnessed a literal miracle, it didn't matter. They were only there to explain away the goodness in pursuit of their agenda. As the passage ends, the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel against him, how to destroy him. I sat there in church and I thought, our press are just like these Pharisees. Not all of you, but the legacy Trump-hating press. Your politically motivated animus for President Trump nearly completely blinds you from the brilliance of our American warriors. The Pharisees scrutinized every good act in order to find a violation, only looking for the negative. The hardened hearts of our press are calibrated only to impugn. I would ask you to open your eyes to the goodness, the historic success of our troops, the courage of this president.
Never in America could we imagine a cabinet secretary asking the press to, quote, open your eyes to the courage of the president. Just to show this fever is apparently catching, here's a Republican congressman doing another godly comparison of Trump.
I believe that Donald Trump is better than sliced bread. I think he's almost the second coming, in my humble opinion.
The founders of this nearly 250-year-old democracy would be appalled to see this Roman cult-like worship of an American president from his own party. But now for the good news. Across the pond, the dam is breaking, with the leader of Britain's Liberal Democrats calling out Trump in Parliament.
Regrettably, he is no friend of the United Kingdom. He's no leader of the free world. He is a dangerous and corrupt gangster, and that is how we must treat him.
And in Hungary, at the start of this week, the strongman that J.D. Vance campaigned for last week lost his election spectacularly. On Monday, authoritarian expert Tim Snyder told Lawrence why that should make Americans very hopeful, especially in a midterm election year.
The most fundamental lesson of all this, though, is that these guys can be beaten, and they can be beaten badly. Orban was at the center, somewhere between Trump and Putin. He is the one who pioneered a system where where the elections are unfair, where it's all uphill, where the media is too tilted towards the government. He did all of that, and nevertheless, he got absolutely walloped in an unfair election. He got walloped in an election which was rigged in his direction. This is the fundamental lesson, that it can be done, that you can win, and in fact, you can win big.
For Americans who can't wait until Election Day, No Kings has announced its next day of action on May Day, May 1st, which will surely bring out more mass protest images like these. Joining us now, Richard Stengel, former Undersecretary of State during the Obama administration. He is now an MS Now political analyst. Rick, great to see you. There were some real highs and some real lows in terms of the democracy autocracy barometer this week. What's your take?
Well, Jonathan, great to be with you. Let's start with the highs. I was incredibly heartened by the election in Hungary. It's a great example for America because Orban was an autocratic figure who had far more control of his country than Donald Trump had. He had pioneered this idea of state capture, of taking over the media, taking over the business world, taking over the court system. So in order to campaign against him, you had to go directly to the voters. That's what Mr. Magyar did. He relentlessly did retail campaigning, and he went around state media, reaching to people directly. That is a great strategy for the Democrats that we should all follow because, we still have a free press. We still have a functioning court system. We almost have a Congress that works. We have a free business community. So it's a great lesson. If we're going to go to the downsides of Mr. Hegseth, he's absolutely within his rights to criticize the press. That's absolutely fine for a cabinet member to do, to say the press has been too critical of the military. But he shouldn't put it in a religious context as though somehow reporters are sacrilegious or irreligious or violating some godly edict. But it's also another one of those things, with Trump, every accusation is also a confession. He has had bad press. He himself has had bad press, and the administration has had bad press for not having a rationale for the invasion. I would say that the press coverage of the military action, the people executing that strategy, has been fair and even laudatory. So I would disagree with that.
In your role at State, Rick, you were America's soft power czar, and you wrote recently, the foreign policy word for favorability is soft power. How our culture and popularity, rather than our military strength, allows us to influence other nations. It is the power of influence, not the influence of power. Has Trump forced himself into being America's biggest cultural export?
It's a negative export. I mean, he has become the incarnation of the ugly American, which is a phrase back from the 1950s, which was about a kind of a bumptious, aggressive America. But even the ugly American of the 1950s talked about the need for democracy. Trump has turned the ugly American into the immoral, venal American, someone who doesn't care about democracy. He just cares about the enrichment of oligarchs. He just cares about flexing power. So American popularity ratings, our soft power, is the lowest it's been since the end of the first term, which was the lowest that had been since the Iraq invasion under President Bush. And people around the world have said, you keep telling us that you're going to change. President Biden said America is back, and the rest of the world said for how long? And then Trump was elected. So I think a lot of people feel like, we can't really trust America anymore. Trump has dissolved our alliances. He's gotten rid of the incredible resilience of soft power aid, which was foreign aid. So I think people are sort of writing America off. And, our soft power is incredibly important to us. It supports tourism. It supports higher ed. It supports foreign students going to higher ed, which contribute $50 billion to our economy. All of that stuff is trending downward.
Richard Stengel, thank you very much for coming to The Last Word.
Thank you, Jonathan.
And tonight's last word is next. Before we go tonight, a reminder, you can join me again along with my co-hosts, Jackie Alemany and Eugene Daniels, tomorrow and Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern here on MS Now. Tomorrow, we will be joined by Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal of Washington State and Minnesota's Democratic Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. I hope you will tune in.